course. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Welcome to Malayan Colleges Laguna, to our new students. And again, welcome to SS031. This is Understanding the Self. And again, ako po si Sir E, Professor Erland de Vera Palayan, your facilitator, your online instructor. Please address me as Sir E. Again, welcome everyone to Understanding the Self. And this morning, before we proceed, I will be giving you a very brief course introduction for our class. Again, this is S031, Understanding the Self. And in light of the course title, what we are after in this course is to answer the question, who am I? Sino ba ako? Ito po ang ating pag-uukulan ng pansin as we trod our way dito po sa ating discussion sa understanding the self. For us to better understand who we are, we will be trying to answer the question, who am I? And again, as we speak, when we speak of S031, Understanding the Self, this course deals with the nature of identity as well as the factors and forces that affect the development and maintenance of personal identity. That is why our primary objective for this course is to know oneself. And for us to understand and know ourselves, we will try to answer the question, who am I? And we will look at the concept of the self and identity. This course will also stress the integration of the personal with the academic, meaning we will try to contextualize matters discussed in the classroom and in everyday experiences of the students. That's the reason why there will be coursework essays that I will be asking you to do, where you will integrate what you have learned from our lectures and integrate them, okay, in your personal life, because most of the courseworks that I will be giving you will be reflective enough for you to go about reflecting, meditating, and whatnot in order for us to understand ourselves deeper. Okay, making for better learning, generating a new appreciation for the learning process, and developing a more critical and reflective attitude while enabling you guys to manage, hopefully, and improve yourselves for you also to attain a better quality of life. So here are our course outcomes. Number one, we will discuss the different representations and conceptualizations of the self from various disciplinary perspectives. Later on, I will be introducing you these different disciplines. Okay, next one, we will examine the different influences, factors, and forces that shape the self. As we go about our discussion on understanding the self, we will be looking at these influences. We will be going over these factors and forces that hopefully will make us realize, oh, these are the reasons why I am who I am right now. These are the reasons why I act the way I do. This is the reason why I think the way I do. And this is the reason why I speak the way I do. And also, we will explore and the different aspects of self and identity. Later on, I will be explaining also these different aspects of the self and identity. Part of our course outcomes also are the following. We will examine oneself against the different aspects of a self discussed in class. So you will be later on realizing that we have the different aspects of the self that made us realize that whoever I am right now is actually a product of these mixtures of perspectives of life, okay, of the different influences, okay, that we had in life. And also, we will acquire and hone new skills and learnings for better managing of oneself and behavior. So, in our discussion of understanding the self, we will be dividing these into three parts or three different modules. The first one, we will be looking at the construals of the self from various perspectives. And when I speak of the word construals, please do not be confused with the jargons that we will be using here in class. When I say construals, meaning understanding. Okay, so the first module will be concentrating on the understanding of the self from different perspectives. The second module, we will be looking at the various aspects that make up the self. And lastly, the third module, we will be trying to manage and take care of ourselves. So meaning we will be applying what we learned from modules 1 and 2 in module 3. So these are practical applications of the concepts of the self discussed in modules 1 and 2. So as we go about, these are the topics that we will be going over for our first module, okay? So for our first module, our discussion will concentrate on the self from various perspectives. And these various perspectives are the disciplines that you are seeing right now on your screen. So we will be answering the question, who am I, from the perspective of philosophy, from the perspective of psychology and sociology and anthropology. That's the reason why for your first proper lecture, the question of who am I will be answered from the philosophical view of the self. Okay, again, as we trod upon our discussion on understanding the self, our first proper lecture will concentrate on understanding the self from the philosophical perspective. Okay, and when we talk about philosophy, definitely, perhaps this is a course that you have taken back in your senior high school. Okay, but when you speak of philosophy, this is actually very broad. Okay, and there are a lot of philosophers that we will be discussing, and we will be looking at their concept of the self, and hopefully it will help us to understand who we are in light of how we understand to be. Later on, I will be discussing more of this. And also another perspective that we will be looking upon as we trod our discussion on understanding the self is the psychological perspective of the self. And when we talk about the psychological perspective of the self, of course, when we speak of psychology, it tries to understand human behavior in light of what goes on in the brain, right? It's very intrinsic. Okay, so this is what we are going to understand. How we are going to understand and answer the question, who am I, in light of what is taking place inside our brains. Okay, so that's the second discipline. And the third one is the to answer the question, who am I, from the perspective of sociology and anthropology. While I was writing this part of the book, I uh, I made sure, okay, na pinagsama ko po, okay, yung discipline ng sociology and anthropology, because these are twin disciplines, okay? Magkasama po itong disiplina na ito palagi. That's why if you're going to look at our concept of understanding the self, ito po ay ang pinagsasama po natin dito is actually the perspective of um, sociology and anthropology. After understanding the self from the perspective of philosophy and psychology, we will look at the self as a social construct. Okay, when we talk about the social construction of the self, this is where we enjoin the disciplines of sociology and anthropology. Okay, kaya po dun sa may ating module, pinagsama ko po itong disciplines na to, and I entitled this, at least dun sa may chapter ng librong sinulat po namin, as the self as a social construct, because again, we are products of our society. And being products of that society, definitely you talk about our history, okay, human history, okay, our development, and how we are affected by the society in light of how we see ourselves to be at the moment. So ito po yung tatlong apat na disciplines that we will be discussing doon sa first module natin. So this is understanding the self from various perspectives. Okay. After that, doon po sa ating module 2, for our second module, we will be looking at the question, who am I? And try to answer that question as we try to unpack ourselves. So on your screen right now, you will be seeing different perspectives of the self. You have the physical self, you have the sexual self, you have the material self, the spiritual self, the political self, and the digital self. So for our second module, these are the topics that we will be discussing. Okay, you might be thinking right now, ang dami pala nating pag-uusapan dito sa klaseng ito, 'di ba? So during our first module, we will be discussing the philosophical view of the self, the psychological view of the self as a social construct, and then for our second module, we will try to dig deeper, okay, into our understanding of who we are. So here, for our second module, hopefully by week 5, okay, the discussions of understanding the self will concentrate on the following: the physical self, the sexual self, the material self, the spiritual self, the political self, and the digital self. Okay, so I'm just giving you a preview of the topics that we will be part of our discussions on understanding the self. Okay, so as we try to answer the question, who am I? These are the things that we will be discussing. And hopefully, okay, we will enjoy our journey in understanding ourselves as we look at these different disciplines, as we look at ourselves from these various perspectives. And for our third module, we will be applying what we learned about who we are from modules 1 and 2. And for our third module, we will be trying to manage and take care of ourselves. So here, we'll try to bring in our learnings, okay, um, on how to be a better student. Also, we'll try to set goals for success. And also, we will try to take charge of our health. So, ito po yung inclusive doon sa last module natin. So, as I already have given you a glimpse of how our uh, term will look like, hopefully you already have an idea of how is this going to be, okay, for the next 12 weeks of your lives, at least on SS31. Again, welcome to SS031. This is Understanding the Self. And again, I am Sir E, your professor, your online class instructor, and facilitator. Okay, now let me just go over to how we will be doing our online class delivery for SS031. Now, ours will be a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous sessions. What we are doing right now is synchronous session, but since I am recording this lecture right now, and when I upload this, you can go over to our lectures if you need some time to reflect upon what we are supposed to do in class. Again, ours will be a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous lectures. I will be giving you a heads up when we shall meet synchronously. Now, if we're going to meet a synchronous way, I will be sending you the links to our recorded video lectures. Okay. Okay. Next one, about our course evaluation. At least for those new students that we have here, we have our grades divided into two large groups. Okay, so the learning tasks and our course assessment. For our learning task, this will be inclusive of our group activities, courseworks, and quizzes. Now, this will be inclusive of 40% of your grade. And then you have three major course assessments. You have the preliminary course assessment, the midterm course assessment, and your final course assessment, which are divided into like 20% each. So that's 60%. So we added up with our learning tasks. So that would be a total of 100%. Now, at least for this term, I will not be giving you outcomes-based exam. Yay! Okay. All of our major exams will be online exams. Can I hear an amen for that, right? Okay, so you do not have
Amen.
an okay, for our exam here sa SS31 po. I will not be giving you an output-based exam, but I will be asking you to do an online objective exam. Yeah, thank you very much for the amen. Okay, so that's at least for our course evaluation. Okay, and then for our online quizzes, okay, for our online quizzes, you will be given 2 attempts to take your quiz on Blackboard. And your first online quiz will take place next week. And our topic for that is the philosophical view of the self. Again, you will be given 2 attempts to take your quiz on Blackboard. Your final score will be averaged, okay? So your first attempt and your second attempt scores will be averaged, and that will be your final score. However, if you are already satisfied with your first attempt, there is no need to take the second attempt. Thus, your first attempt score will be your final score. Okay, for our online exams, this is for your major course assessment, your prelim exam, your midterm exam, and your final exam. You will be given 1 attempt only. Let me repeat that. You will be given a single attempt only to take your exam on Blackboard. And if I may, please do take your exam at a time when at least no one is using the internet in your house, or at least you can ask your family members to give you that time, okay, to take your online exam. For those new students, particularly if you're not coming from MCL or MCL senior high, for your online exam, you will only be given 1 attempt for this, 60 minutes. Okay? And if in case magkaroon po ng glitch sa inyong exam, say when your exam has been downloaded and then ayaw niyong mag-proceed, please immediately inform me. It should not take 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 1 day to tell me that, sir, I'm sorry, but while I am taking my exam, nagkaroon po ng glitch, hindi ko po matake ulit. Hindi na po siya nag-uusad. And so I will be looking at your attempt online before I will decide whether to give you another chance to take your online exam. Makikita naman po namin yun. I will be able to objectively say, okay, this happened, so I will clear your attempt, and then I will ask you to take the exam again. Okay, so please make sure, okay, that your internet connection is very much available, and it's actually really good. If at all possible, make a speed test first, okay, before you take the exam. Next one, for your coursework, and you will have a lot of courseworks here since understanding the self is very much reflective. Okay, for your essay courseworks, please make sure to follow the instructions carefully. Later on, I will be explaining to you your first coursework in our class. Kindly also check for plagiarism content before submitting. Meaning, when you talk about plagiarism, it's presenting a work that is not yours and presenting that as yours. So definitely that is a plagiarized work. Now, the Save Assign tab on Blackboard is turned on for me, and also for you to check, okay, the originality of your work. So when you have already uploaded your coursework, you can check the Save Assign button whether your submission has its copied content. The maximum that I could give is only 15%. That is if you will be including like quotation from personalities and whatnot. But since your courseworks are very much reflective, I don't think that it is necessary for you to do that, okay, to include quotations and whatnot. What I would want for you to do is to make sure that your answers are very much reflective. That will include your learnings from our lectures, from our video lectures, and your reflections upon our lectures as well. Okay, so this will be very personal. So I don't think you will be needing quotations from people and whatnot. Okay, now let me proceed now. For our attendance, I will be very lenient on this one because ours will be a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous anyway, and I'm sure that some of you are still struggling with your internet connection at the moment. However, if in case you will not be able to take your quiz or your exam, please make sure that you inform me immediately. Ang pinakaayoko po is ako ang naghahabol sa estudyante. You are already grown-ups, people, and hindi dapat kayo hinahabol ng mga estudyante, ng mga professor ninyo. Okay? So say for example, you were not able to take your quiz or your exam. I definitely remind my students, but only to a certain extent. Okay? Kapag po, and your professors have access on whether you are accessing your Blackboard accounts or not. Okay? So say for example, nag-send ako ng course message sa inyo at hindi kayo nagre-reply sa akin. The thing is, I can check online when you are accessing your Blackboard accounts. Meaning, alam niyo if you are receiving course messages from your professors. And sometimes there are students, hopefully not in your section, there are students who are ignoring course messages from their professors. And I've seen a lot of them. Okay, so please don't be that. You are grown-ups. You have to be responsible. You know the drill, and you should know the drill of how this works, at least in college. Okay, particularly in our setting at the moment. Okay? I will be very lenient on your attendance. Walang babagsak sa attendance dito. Pero may bumabagsak pa rin po sa klase. There are still students who flunk the courses because they are not delivering. Sometimes there are students who only take their exams, but they do not submit their courseworks. They do not take their quizzes. And you have to understand that if you're only taking your major exams, that's 60% for you to pass your course in MCL. But then again, if you're only going to take your major exams, meaning your prelim, your midterms, and your final exam, you have to make sure that you'll get perfect scores for each for you to get 60%. If you're not going to take any of your learning tasks, then make sure that you will be able to get perfect scores in your major exam to pass the course. Because there are students who do that. But I hope you won't. I hope it's clear. I hope it's clear to everyone, okay? There are still students who flunk the course. And please, I beg you, I beseech you, please be responsible on this one. With your quizzes, with your learning tasks, and your exams. I hope I'm making myself clear. Okay, let's proceed. Now, let's proceed with Blackboard Learn, okay? For those who are still new in using Blackboard, at least I think and I believe that there were sessions hold, okay, there were sessions held for you to be able to know and learn how to navigate a Blackboard Learn. You know, in this kind of setting that we do have at the moment, the only way for you to survive our online classes is for you to be able to know how to navigate the Blackboard Learn. Okay, so I plead, I ask you people, I ask you students to make sure that you are able to know how to manage and navigate the Blackboard Learn. You have to check Blackboard Learn from time to time for all your courses, for course messages, for announcements, for quizzes, for learning tasks, and whatnot. Hindi po ito pwedeng gabing nyo lang siya i-check. You have to regularly check Blackboard Learn because, again, you are a student. Ang Blackboard Learn ko po is always naka-open sa aking laptop at sa aking phone, because I always check whether my students have course messages or whatnot. Okay? Nakikita nyo naman po, I'm very much active on Blackboard. Okay? So I have announcements for you from time to time, and if you are not able to check on your announcements, I give course messages also. And for the announcements, nakikita ko din po kung ilang students lang ang nagbabasa ng announcement. And doon po sa may announcement natin, chine-check ko pa doon for you to be able to receive the announcements as well on your email. So there is no reason, at least for these scores, for you to tell me that, sir, I'm sorry, I don't know what we are up to in our class, because we also have our Facebook group. Okay, so make sure that you have joined our Facebook group as well, because that will serve as our springboard for our Blackboard Learn. Okay, so there is no way for you to say that you are not knowledgeable about what is happening in our classes, because again, you have Blackboard Learn. And I am very much active in giving announcements and in sending course messages in our Blackboard Learn account and also in our Facebook group. Okay? Again, there is no way for you to survive MCL right now except by knowing and learning how to navigate Blackboard Learn. As we proceed with regards to our textbook, this will be our textbook for SS31. This is Introspection, Understanding the Self, of which I am one of the authors. Okay, this is Introspection, Understanding the Self. If my recollection serves me right, we published this book back in 2019. Okay, so since 2019, this has been the book that we are using at MCL. So this is our textbook for SS31 at MCL, not only in MCL, but there are a lot of schools around the Philippines that are using this book as their textbook for understanding the self, since understanding the self is one of the required general education courses, okay, for SS031 for understanding the self. And if you're seeing these pictures on your left right now, so these are the authors of SS31. So these are also some of my colleagues. Perhaps some of them will be your professors also in the future, if not now, if not this term. Okay, again, so this is our textbook, Introspection, Understanding the Self. Okay, and this is me. Let me introduce myself for a moment. Again, I am Professor Erland de Vera Palayan. Please address me as Sir E. Okay, and at least this is a short bio note that I have. At least I took this from our YouTube channel. Okay, so hindi ko na po babasahin lahat ito. You have your time anyway to know who I am. You can check this one. I finished my master's degree in South Korea, Church Trinity Graduate University in Seoul, South Korea. I lived there for 4 years. I know how to speak the language, conversational, but that's an international school, so our medium of instruction and our medium of learning is in English. But definitely, I do have to survive the culture, so I learned the language in a way. In our succeeding lectures, you will be learning more about me as well as I bring in my experiences, particularly for our third lecture, The Self as a Social Construct. Makikita nyo po doon yung journey ko on how I understood myself in light of all the learnings that I got from the societies where somehow I was able to enrich myself and where I was able to live at least. Okay, so ako po si Sir E. Please address me as Sir E. Gusto ko po yung Sir E, may exclamation point at pasigaw. Gusto ko po sinisigawan ako. Okay, so again, ako po ang inyong online instructor, and I hope and I believe that you are in good hands anyway, Nessa 031, because I am one of the co-authors of the book that we are using at the moment. Okay, and thank you very much for joining us in our and enrolling in these course as well. Okay, thank you very much, and that will serve as our at least introduction to our course. Now, for our first lecture, people, again, as I told you, our first lecture for our first module is on the philosophical view of the self. So here we will try to answer the question, who am I, from the philosophical view of the self. And when we talk about the philosophical view of the self, here we will try to understand the importance of knowing ourselves, and we will try to assess the philosophical perspective of the self by critiquing the arguments given, and also hopefully we will be able to develop our own answers to the question, who am I? Now, we have to understand that philosophy has always sought to answer life's difficult questions and has relentlessly pursued answers to these, no matter how seemingly futile the quest might be. Now, as we try to understand and answer the question of who am I from a philosophical perspective, in this lecture, we will try to answer the following questions. Just what exactly are we? And when we try to answer the question, just what exactly are we were looking at the perspective, how do we see ourselves to be? How do we look at ourselves? Who are we really? Okay. And the second question here that we'll try to answer is, what do we even mean by the self? And since our course title is Understanding the Self, we will try to navigate this lecture as we try to understand the meaning of the self. As we go over to our next question for this lecture, are we souls? Tayo ba ay mga kaluluwa lamang? Are we organic bodies? Are we corporeal beings? Meaning, tayo ba talaga are physical beings only? Or are we just figment of another's imagination? Meaning, whenever we see each other, do we really see the real us? Or what we are just seeing are figments of imagination? Are just imperfect reflections of the perfect us. Now, that is too philosophical, if I may say. But then again, what I would want for us to understand right now is that when we talk about the philosophical view of the self, this is very vague. This is very deep. And so, as we try to look at the answers to all these questions, we will be looking at the answers from different philosophers throughout time. Okay, and how they look at the self. To be also, we will look at the question, are we just minds or a combination of body and mind? Because there are philosophers who would say that man is more of mind than physical beings. Excuse me. And also, the question of surviving bodily death. Is there life after death? Will I survive bodily death because I am more than a body, or when my body is dead, that's really the end? So you talk about the cessation of life. When I say the cessation of life, meaning, is the end of life necessary, the end of it already when we stop breathing, or is there a life here after? Because that has been a question of man ever since. And also, the question of whether we are robots controlled by some forces higher than us, or perhaps we are controlled by some entity out there. And so, as we look at understanding the self from a philosophical perspective, what I would want for you to understand is this is the most difficult lecture for our course. Because again, hey, this is philosophy anyway. Okay, and philosophy is never easy. But let me say that if you're able to power through these lecture, then the next lectures will be easy breezy, meaning it will be more easier to understand. But what I would want for you to understand is that please do not be confused with the jargons that we'll be using, at least in this course, particularly for our first lecture, because the jargons here might be too much for some of you. But what I would want for you to understand is that you try just to understand the meaning behind the words, and that's enough. Okay? So again, this is just giving you a preview of our first um, lecture. And thank you very much for joining me today. Again, this has been our course introduction for SS31. I am Sir E. Thank you for